The hidden affair in the Hamptons. Emily Harrington had always believed that money could buy many things, but never loyalty. At 58, she carried herself with the quiet elegance of old money, her silver-streaked auburn hair pulled into a low chignon, her wardrobe filled with timeless linen dresses and pearl earrings that had belonged to her grandmother. The Harrington family estate in East Hampton was more than a house. It was a legacy, a sprawling waterfront property with white shingles and blue hydrangeas that had hosted generations of summer parties, charity galas, and quiet family dinners overlooking the Atlantic. Emily had poured her heart into preserving it, turning the guest cottage into a foundation office where she organized fundraisers for coastal conservation. Her husband, Mark, 62, a charismatic real estate developer who built luxury condos in Manhattan, seemed like the perfect partner. They had met at Yale, married young, raised their only son, Blake, and built a life that glittered on the surface. That summer, everything began to crack. Mark started staying late in the city, claiming client dinners and urgent deals. He came home smelling faintly of a perfume Emily did not recognize, something expensive and youthful with notes of jasmine and vanilla. At first she dismissed it as stress. The market was volatile. His firm was competing for a major Brooklyn waterfront project. But doubt crept in slowly, like fog rolling off the ocean. One July evening, Emily borrowed Mark's black Range Rover to drive into town for groceries. As she reached into the glove compartment for sunglasses, her fingers brushed against a small, sleek tube. She pulled it out and stared. Luxury personal lubricant, half-used, the cap slightly sticky. Her stomach twisted. They had not been intimate in years. Mark always blamed exhaustion, age, medication. So why was this here? And why did it look recently opened? That night, she waited until his breathing deepened into sleep, then slipped his phone from the nightstand. The lock code was still their wedding date. She scrolled through messages, nothing obvious. But in the deleted emails folder, she found reservations confirmations for a boutique inn in East Hampton, dinners at upscale restaurants she had never visited with him. One email from an address she did not recognize read, "Simply can't wait for our weekend escape, Daddy," followed by a red heart emoji. Daddy. The word hit her like ice water. Blake, their 30-year-old son, was engaged to Sarah, a 28-year-old marketing consultant with long blonde hair, bright green eyes, and ambition that burned brighter than her smile. Sarah had moved in elite circles, met Blake at a charity event, and quickly became part of the family. Emily had welcomed her, taught her the Harrington traditions, even gifted her a pearl necklace for her birthday. Could it be? She did not sleep. The next morning she called her oldest friend, Caroline, who summered nearby. Over coffee on Caroline's terrace, Emily confessed what she had found. Caroline did not hesitate. "You need Thomas," she said. "He helped my sister during her divorce." Discreet professional. By noon, Emily was sitting in a quiet cafe in Southampton meeting Thomas, a former NYPD detective, now private investigator. He listened without judgment, took notes on his phone, promised results within days. Emily handed him a flash drive with photos of the lubricant tube, the email screenshots, the inn reservations. "Find out the truth," she said, her voice steady though her hands trembled. Thomas worked fast. 3 days later, he texted, "Meet me, same place." Emily arrived early, ordered an iced tea, tried to calm her racing heart. Thomas slid a folder across the table. Photos first, Mark and Sarah holding hands, walking into the inn, laughing over candlelit dinners on the terrace. Then worse, video stills from a hidden camera in the inn parking lot, Sarah leaning into Mark in the front seat of the Range Rover, kissing him with urgency. Audio clips too, Sarah's voice low and eager, "We have to move faster, Daddy. Once the trust is rewritten, Emily won't have a claim." Mark murmuring, "Don't worry, sweetheart, I'll handle the documents. My lawyer owes me favors." Emily felt the world tilt. They were not just having an affair, they were plotting to steal her inheritance. The beach house worth $25 million was in a family trust, but Mark had access to certain legal loopholes. Sarah, it seemed, had convinced him to forge Emily's signature, transfer control to a new entity they would own together after divorcing their respective partners. Rage came first, then cold calculation. 40 years of marriage reduced to greed and betrayal. She thought of Blake, proud of his father, excited about his wedding, planning a future with Sarah. He deserved to know, but Emily needed irrefutable proof. She asked Thomas to keep watching, gather every document, every recording. Meanwhile, she played the perfect wife, smiling at breakfast, asking about his day, pretending to believe his lies. Inside, she planned. August brought the annual Harrington Foundation Gala. Emily hosted it flawlessly in a flowing white gown, greeting guests, accepting compliments on the estate. Mark stood beside her, charming as ever, Sarah on Blake's arm, radiant in emerald silk. Emily watched them across the lawn, Sarah's hand lingering too long on Mark's arm when she thought no one noticed, Mark's eyes following Sarah when Blake turned away. That night, after the guests left, Emily excused herself early, claiming a headache. She went to the guest cottage, opened her laptop, and reviewed everything Thomas had sent. Bank transfers from Mark's personal account to Sarah's, jewelry purchases, hotel bills, a draft of the forged trust amendment with Emily's signature practiced in Sarah's handwriting. Enough for court, but Emily wanted more than legal victory. She wanted justice that burned. She learned through Thomas that Mark and Sarah had booked the family yacht for a private weekend cruise while Blake was in London for work and Emily was supposedly visiting her sister in Boston. The yacht, of 50-foot beauty named Legacy, was docked at the private marina. Emily knew every inch of it. The plan formed crystal clear. Late one night, while Mark slept deeply after too much scotch, she slipped out to the garage, took the spare yacht key, and drove to the marina. The moon was thin, the water black and calm. She boarded quietly, went below to the master cabin. In the nightstand drawer, exactly where she expected, she found another tube of the same lubricant, freshly opened. She took it to the galley, opened her bag, and removed a small container of industrial-grade marine epoxy adhesive, the kind used for hull repairs, fast-setting, waterproof, nearly impossible to dissolve without solvents. Carefully, she emptied the lubricant into a plastic bag, disposed of it overboard, then filled the tube with epoxy, wiped the nozzle, shook it gently until it looked identical. She placed it back exactly as found. Next, she moved to the galley. Using a hot plate from the cottage and some oily cleaning rags, she rigged a simple time device set to overheat after 60 minutes, creating thick smoke without real fire. She connected it to the yacht's smoke alarm system, which would automatically send a distress signal to the Coast Guard. Everything in place, she locked up, left no trace, drove home, and slept better than she had in weeks. The next morning, she kissed Mark goodbye, wished him a relaxing weekend on the water, told him she was heading to Boston early to beat traffic. He barely looked up from his phone, smiling absently. "Have fun, darling." Blake had already left for his flight. Emily drove instead to a discreet bed and breakfast nearby, checked in under a false name, and waited. Thomas had installed a small audio feed on the yacht for surveillance. She could listen remotely. At noon, Mark and Sarah boarded, giggling like teenagers, champagne already chilling. Emily listened from her room, heart pounding, as they cast off, motored into the bay. Conversation light at first, then intimate, Sarah teasing Daddy about how clever he was, Mark promising her the world once the papers were signed. Then the sounds changed, clothes rustling, laughter turning to moans. Emily closed her eyes, waited. 40 minutes later, panic, Sarah's voice sharp. "What is this? It won't separate." Mark cursing, trying to stay calm. "It's stuck. Wait, let me." Frantic, struggling cries of pain. Then the smoke began billowing from the galley, the alarm blaring, automatically triggering the distress beacon. Emily watched through binoculars from the shore as the Coast Guard cutter sped toward the yacht. On board, chaos, Sarah screaming, Mark roaring in frustration. The rescue team boarded professionally at first, then stunned silence as they discovered the couple naked, literally glued together in the master berth. Attempts to separate them failed. The epoxy was military grade. They wrapped sheets around the pair, carried them topside on stretchers. And there on the rescue boat was Blake. He had changed his flight, come home early. To surprise Sarah, joined the volunteer maritime rescue team for the weekend shift. He stood frozen, staring at his father and his fiancée, trapped in the ultimate betrayal, his face draining of color. Words spread instantly. Phones came out, videos recorded from nearby boats. By evening, the story exploded. Page 6 headlines screaming, "Hamptons heir caught in sticky situation with son's FINC." TikTok flooded with clips, the yacht name visible, the Harrington estate in the background. Daily Mail ran photos of the stretchers being loaded into ambulances. Society whispered, then roared. Invitations withdrawn, club memberships questioned, business deals canceled. At the hospital, doctors worked for hours using specialized solvents to separate Mark and Sarah's skin raw, but no permanent damage. Emily arrived calm, composed, concerned wife and mother. She brought flowers, spoke softly to the nurses. Then, in the private room, she placed an envelope on the table. Inside, divorce papers for Marcus cease and desist, for Sarah, copies of every forged document, every recording, every bank transfer. Sign these, she said, voice like steel, or I hand everything to the DA for fraud charges. Mark begged, tears in his eyes. Emily, please, it was a mistake. Sarah sobbed, blamed. Mark turned on him in desperation. Emily looked at them both without pity. You chose this, she said. Now live with it. Blake stood in the doorway, face hard. He said nothing, simply turned and left. Sarah's engagement ring lay on the bedside table where she had thrown it. Emily walked out head high. The aftermath was swift. Mark's partners forced him out of the firm, his reputation toxic. Sarah lost her job, clients fled. Criminal charges followed for attempted fraud, the forged documents undeniable. The beach house remained firmly in Emily's trust, untouchable. Blake moved into the guest cottage for a while, the two of them healing slowly over long walks on the beach, quiet dinners, shared grief, turning to resolve. By fall, the scandal had faded into Hamptons lore whispered at parties with a mix of horror and admiration. Emily expanded her foundation, hosted larger galas, donated to women's shelters. People called her unbreakable, the queen who reclaimed her crown. She never spoke publicly about the epoxy, never confirmed the rumors. But sometimes late at night, sitting on the terrace watching waves roll, and she allowed herself a small private smile. Legacy had been preserved in every sense of the word. The house, the family, name, her dignity. All of it hers again, earned through patience and one perfectly executed act of justice. Years later, Blake married a kind-hearted teacher from the city, brought grandchildren to run along the same shores. Emily taught them to sail, told them stories of the sea, but never the full truth of that summer. Some legends she kept for herself, a reminder that even in the glittering world of old money, betrayal has consequences, and a woman scorned can rewrite the ending.